Hello and welcome to Walpole United WFC.
Good afternoon and welcome to the weekly wrap-up show here on Walpole United WFC, hosted by me, Gareth Townsend. No guest with me this afternoon. However, I'm here to take you through all of the weekend's action from the WSL Women's Championship and the National League. We will kick things off, I think, with a little bit of discussion about some teams of the week that have been published before we jump in and start looking at some results. So I will just read these out. The first one is a combination of WSL and the Championship. And the second one that I'm going to read out is actually from the WSL themselves. So we'll go through that. But the first one from FAWSL full-time have Moan in goal from Sunderland, a back three of Ali from Spurs, Potts from Sunderland, and Ona from Manchester United. A midfield four of Kirsty Hansen, Vicky Lasada, Ella Rutherford of Charlton, and Clark of Sheffield United. And then a front three of Beth Mead, Rihanna Dean of Liverpool, and Janine Becky of Manchester City. So interesting to see there some Sunderland players a week after a really impressive win, still kind of getting the recognition. Interesting is that there are some differences between this one and the next one, which comes from the WSL themselves, who have Hannah Hampton in goal. She will, of course, have been disappointed to concede the goal that she did against Leicester, but we'll get onto that later and how she bounced back from that. They have a back four of Hannah Blundell, Steph Horton, whose fantastic free kick was one of the goals that Everton conceded. Jen Beattie and Katie McCabe make up the rest of that back four, with a midfield of Janine Becky, Ella Toon, and Ji So Yun, with Beth Mead in behind Vivian Miedemar and Natasha Flint. So a couple of differences between those two. In fact, I'm not sure. Only really Beth Mead actually featured in both of those teams of the week. Obviously, one featured Championship players, one did not. But I think that for me shows that across the board we had some really good performances from players all around. I don't think really any of those 22 players or 21, because me was in there twice, can be denied a spot in that team of the week. So let's jump in and have a chat about some of the games from this weekend. We'll go in order of kickoff, and we'll start with the WSL. Friday night, the season started at Lee Sports Village, where a large number of people you see on this channel every day finally got back into a football stadium for the first time in 18 months to see United start their season off with a 2-0 win against Reading. Now, for me, it didn't look particularly comfortable in the first 25 minutes for United. I think, I don't know why. Maybe they weren't expecting Reading to come out and put the press on as much as they did. Reading came out, played really confidently and pressed United well and pressed them hard. And it seemed for me as though United just couldn't quite settle into what they wanted to do, couldn't quite settle into the game, and just seemed really to be a bit unsure of kind of where we needed to be and what we needed to do. But that's probably to be expected the first few minutes of a game with a brand new manager. We grew into the game, and after about 25, 30 minutes that first half, we then sort of started to seize control, seemed a lot more comfortable on the ball. The lineup, I think, was interesting. I was really surprised not to see Millie Turner start, and quite surprised as well to see Ella Toon start as a false nine, which I don't think really brings the best out of her. But having said that, she played excellently, and the ball that she played through for Kirsty Hansen in that first half was sensational. It was perfectly weighted, and all Kirsty had to do was finish the chance, which she did. And then I don't think we really ever looked back from there. Going into the second half, again, some really strong work from Ella Toon to play the ball back to Ona to get her goal. And what a fantastic goal that was. What a way to open your scoring and open your account for Manchester United. For me, the standout players in this game were very definitely the fullbacks. I think Hannah Blundell, for me, was the player of the match. I think it's been easy to recognise Ona, particularly because of her goal. But before then, I think in the first half, when things weren't quite going our way, Blundell was the one that really seemed to be getting the ball and making those driving runs forward and linking up well with some of the other players. And everything she did, she looked to be positive and looked to get the ball forward and looked to take players on and move into the attacking third. So I think she was really impressive. And, absolutely, I think it's 100% correct that on WSL Team of the Week that she was the fullback that placed within there. Tooney as well had a fantastic game, and it's right that she's in. But, can't complain either about Ona or about Kirsty Hansen making those teams of the week. Both of them had fantastic performances, both of them getting on the score sheet. And, we look to kick on from here and see what we can achieve. Last season around Christmas, we thought we could challenge for the title. We had a much more difficult run of games at the start. So good to get the confidence up and running already. Moving on to the next game then, which was at Banks Stadium on Saturday afternoon, rather, where Aston Villa beat Leicester City 2-1. This was a really interesting game for me. Leicester, newly promoted side, made quite a few changes, or made quite a few additions, rather, to their squad. But for me, the interesting thing here was that Leicester opted to start with a back three. There was a few question marks at the beginning as to whether or not they would start and look to maybe defend and grow into the game before looking to come out and start attacking and really going for it. But they didn't seem to do that. It seemed to really, it was a lineup with some attacking intent, starting with Shannon O'Brien, Natasha Flint, Hannah Kane, Paige Bailey Gale, and Jess Diggsworth, all in that starting 11, showed some real intent. And I think for the first half, they looked really strong. They looked like the better side. They made the better chances, and they made Hannah Hampton work a lot more than Aston Villa, who are also a new look squad, new manager, first game under Carla Ward. Didn't really work Kirsty Lavelle in that first half as much as I think they would have. Hannah Hampton made some really good saves, I think, for Aston Villa. And she'll have been disappointed to concede the goal. It wasn't, I don't think it was Natasha Flint's best chance of that first half. But a goal's a goal. Herself in post-match interviews, they all count. And they absolutely do. And they took the lead. And I think at half-time, Leicester were good for their lead. But something changed at half-time. And I think Carla being able to get Villa in, speak to them, sit them down, explain what was going on, meant that they could come out in that second half and something could change in the way that they played. They grew so much easier into the second half. Looked like a completely different side to that played in the first half. There's question marks over the free kick. Was it a foul? But there was absolutely no questions over the quality of the free kick to get them back into the game from Mailing. It was inch perfect. Kirsty Lavelle had no chance of saving that, and they were back into the game. And people say, isn't there? There's the old adage that you're never more vulnerable than when you've just conceded. And we saw that when there was a slight lapse in concentration and a slight defensive error, and it allowed Alicia Lehman to kind of move the ball forward and get that ball into position where Remy Allen was able to score the winner against the side with which she won the championship last season. Interesting to see kind of what Leicester do moving forward from here. We have a preview show this evening looking at that with Hannah from their supporters club. But it'd be interesting to see whether they stick with the back three or whether they switch it up and look to move forward. But, I think Carla Ward will be disappointed actually with their performance. I think, she probably would say herself that wasn't their best and they can perform better. So it'll be interesting to see how they look to go again next week and how they look to improve upon where they were last weekend, because we didn't see the best from Aston Villa. They do have a strong squad, and I think they have a squad that's capable of sort of finishing very strongly in mid-table. I don't think they're going to be down around the relegation battle again this year like they were last year. With some sort of strong additions in the likes of Remy Allen and Alicia Lehman. And also, bringing Carla Ward in, who was able to achieve some really great things with Sheffield United 2 seasons ago, and then able to, escape the drop with Birmingham last year, which I don't think anybody really expected that she'd be able to do. So interesting to see how we go from there next week and how they look to build. But, a good win for them after going 1-0 down, and they'll be pleased with that. But before we get on to the Everton Man City game, because I want to do a little bit of analysis on that, we'll just touch on Spurs and Birmingham City, which was played at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So one of the 4 games this week that was played inside the men's stadiums. Spurs won 1-0 against Birmingham City. Kit Graham, just before half-time, was able to get that goal. And I think Birmingham will be disappointed with the way in which they conceded this goal. I'm not sure that Emily Ramsey will be particularly pleased with it either. I think she looked like she was kind of out of position and not really expecting the ball to come in, and Graham was able to score. Birmingham kind of had a couple of chances, but it's one that I said last week that I think when we were talking about this with Matt, that I think this was actually a game where we could get a really good idea of who's going to be down and around the bottom. And for me, Birmingham didn't look particularly strong. I thought it was going to be between them and West Ham, and we'll touch on West Ham shortly. But I think they showed more about them than Birmingham did. I think Birmingham are going to struggle again this year. I'm not sure they've quite got the strength in their squad to be able to go up against the sides that are looking to be in and around them. And, if you're going to be down there in that relegation scrap, then games against Spurs are the kinds of games you're going to need to be picking up points from. So I think Birmingham have been disappointed not to get anything from this game. But having said that, there are still 21 games to go. And if they can bounce back next weekend, we'll briefly touch on next week's fixtures. But, there's a game next week at home where there's definitely potential for them to get a result, and they will absolutely be hoping to do so. So the game on BBC on Saturday came from Goodison Park, where Everton got beaten 4-0 by Manchester City. Now, it was plain to see that Everton were really disappointed with this. They conceded 3 goals inside 12 minutes. When City opened the scoring in the 26th minute to when Khadija Shaw got the 3rd in the 38th minute, City just completely unravelled them. Now, for me, I'm going to bring up my screen in a second. This was a result of Everton playing at Goodison Park, where the pitch that they were playing on absolutely will have suited Manchester City an awful lot more than it would have suited them. I think. Well, let's have a look.
I don't understand, I think.
So this is how Everton lined up initially against Manchester City. You can see they lined up with three at the back, with Bjorn, George and Finnegan playing as the central defenders. Now, what this did is, obviously with Turner and Saveke playing as wing-backs, this meant that Manchester City, who are a much more technical side, who will be able to play a kind of a stronger passing game, be able to keep the ball a lot more, are more likely to thrive on the pristine pitches that we're going to see inside these men's stadiums. Now, we saw quite a lot, and I think Janine Becky and Hayley Raso got so much space down behind, because as these fullbacks pushed up the pitch, what we saw is so much space be created at the back. And as that space was kind of created as well, you would have players shift across. I'll just change the colour of my pen. You would have players that would start to shift across. So Bjorn might move over here, and obviously George might move over, and Finnegan kind of a tiny bit more. But that then just creates even more space over here, as obviously Turner's pushed up and three central defenders have moved across. And the City attackers were just able to exploit that space so easily. The amount of times we saw Janine Becky get in behind, that we saw Hayley Raso get in behind and just cause havoc for these central defenders. And obviously as well, when the fullbacks push up, what you're going to see is Bjorn push out wide, George stay where she is, Finnegan maybe drift out wide as well, which just meant that Khadija Shaw was able to just make these runs here all day, just drift in between the centre halves, which we also saw at the Arsenal-Chelsea game as well. And it was just a system that I think on a pitch that big, they were just doomed to lack success, really. I do think we'll see more from Everton this year than we were able to see there. Halftime came along and they changed things up. They brought Emsley and Benison on and kind of switched up the system. And in the second half, they had chances. They conceded still, of course. It was a fantastic free kick from Steph Horton. But they seemed a lot stronger. They seemed a lot more confident and comfortable in what they were doing. I think in the first half, Kenza Dali had some great opportunities, but that was all really. Whereas in the second half, although they didn't score, they seemed to create a little bit more. They seemed to be a bit more confident and comfortable in what they were doing, because there wasn't this same space that was created in behind the fullbacks. As Turner and Saveke kind of sat back a bit deeper, didn't necessarily bomb forward constantly as wing-backs, but just played a kind of a more orthodox attacking fullback kind of style. And we were just able to see actually that this probably is a system that they should have started with. But by the time it was time to change it, it was too late. Once you go 3 goals down at half time, there's not really anything you can do to get back into the game, particularly against the side of City's quality. Now, obviously, we can say that we can question whether that was a result of Everton being stronger in the second half, or whether that was just a result of actually Man City realising, we've got the 4 goals now. We've won this game. We can kind of take the foot off the gas and just coast and cruise home. Could absolutely have been a result of that as well. But I think Everton looked a little bit stronger in the second half, and they will absolutely be looking to try and bounce back next week, although that's definitely not going to be an easy task against Chelsea. And obviously the reason for that, moving on, is because at the Emirates Stadium, Arsenal won 3-2 against the champions. Now, for me here, it was another example of a team setting up, playing three central defenders in their back line and losing the game. I don't think this was necessarily a system that suited Chelsea. I think Carter got exposed quite a lot. I think for Arsenal, and we'll get onto the goals shortly, their attacking outlets were controlling the game. Usually we say about Arsenal that everything goes through Miedemar, but I don't think that was the case this week. I don't think everything went through Miedemar. I think Iwabuchi seemed to be controlling an awful lot of the midfield. Kind of any of the strengths that were going through her in the first half. She was involved somewhere. And I think Beth Mead probably had the best game I've seen her have for an awfully long time, chipping in with 2 goals. We'll talk about the third one shortly. But that first goal, just after 14 minutes to take the lead, the ball down the wing, exploiting the gap between the centre halves, where Miedemar kind of got in behind Carter, was able to take a touch, shift onto a stronger foot inside the box, and finish superbly. And I think that kind of shocked a lot of people. I don't think people really saw Arsenal this year as being able to compete with Chelsea. Personally, I didn't think their squad was deep enough. I still think that it's one where a couple of injuries and things could really go south for them, and they will absolutely be looking to keep all their players fit, much like Man United. But I think, there were players out there, maybe Beth Mead, looking at players, Nikita Paris came in, started on the bench. Tobin Heath has come in, wasn't available for selection this game, but, should be soon. Interestingly, Arsenal playing a diamond with Iwabuchi sitting in behind Miedemar and Mead with Leah Volti sat a bit deeper in front of the midfield. But I think this has kind of gone to show actually that Arsenal are capable, and they were able really well to exploit the gaps in the defence from Chelsea. There were just so many gaps between the centre halves that each of the 3 goals kind of came from finding space between the centre halves. Yes, Mead's third goal was offside, and definitely shouldn't have stood. But at that point, there were still 2-1 up, and if Mead doesn't score that goal, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Chelsea would have come back and won it. But that goal shouldn't have stood. But it doesn't take away from the finish that Mead executed. I think she had a fantastic game. I think it's probably the best that I've seen her play for an awfully long time. And I think Arsenal just looked like a much more organised defensive unit. Everyone seemed to know what they were doing. There wasn't really many spaces left for Chelsea players to get in behind and cause havoc. The goals kind of came from crosses. I think the first one, they got it away, but didn't quite get it clear enough. And Cuthbert was there to apply the finish. And then the second goal was just a fantastic header from Pernille Harder. But on the whole, Arsenal just seems way more defensively solid than Chelsea did. And I think Leah Williamson had a genuinely fantastic game as well. We've seen Jen Beattie and Katie McCabe get mentioned in Team of the Week, but I think Leah Williamson for me stood out in that defence as kind of being the stronger one, as well as Mead and Miedemar up front as well. G was very positive in the Chelsea midfield. I think particularly in the first half when things were still, when they were looking to get that first equaliser. She was very, very good at being able to kind of be positive, much like kind of Blundell was for United, in that she was get the ball and drive it forward and really look to create something. I think that's what she was doing for Chelsea. Game did start to change a little bit when Chelsea were able to make that triple substitution of bringing Sam Kerr, Fran Kirby and Sophie Ingle on. But, Arsenal were able to respond and make a pretty strong double substitution of their own, kind of bringing Paris on to who got involved. But it's definitely going to be interesting. I think if Arsenal can stay fit, then they've shown us this weekend that they can almost certainly hang with the big two from last season. And it is definitely up to the rest of the WSL to catch down this big three, and hopefully, fingers crossed, United can do that this year. But I think similar to Arsenal, really, if they're going to challenge for the title, if we're going to challenge for the top three, it relies on us keeping that whole squad fit. I think that's what this has shown. And the final game of the WSL this season came from the Amex, where Brighton and Hove Albion beat West Ham United 2-0. A handball early on, sort of to 32 minutes, that saw Sissoko sent off, meant that Cagman was able to give Brighton the lead. Before that, we saw Adriana Leon hit the bar from a long-range shot that, keeper was well beaten. And I think if that goes in, then are we looking at a completely different game? Yes, potentially, but it didn't. And Brighton went up the pitch and they scored from that penalty. And then they were able, not too long later, Lee Gun-min went and sort of seized on a bit of a kind of ricochet ball around the defence and was able to make it 2-0. I think Brighton, looked pretty good. They looked pretty strong. I know some people kind of have them finishing up around sort of 6th, 7th. I'm not quite sure they'll be up around there. I think for me, Villa seem the more likely to be up and around there. Villa and Leicester potentially. But I think Brighton will be absolutely fine, 8th, somewhere around there. West Ham I thought might struggle. But, they were able to create chances, and even though they were down to 10 for a good portion of the game, they still created chances. They still caused Brighton some problems. And, I think a lot of their season is going to depend on finding one player that can really kind of stand out and drag them through to results when things maybe aren't quite going their way. Kind of like Ebony Salmon did for Bristol. See, that didn't quite work out for them in the end, but Adriana Leon could be that person, could be that one that when West Ham really needs something, is able to find a goal or find something to just lift them that little bit. I think she could have done so today. She had a chance and a couple of chances, including hitting the bar. But we'll see. I think West Ham will probably be fine, but I think they will be one of the ones that are sort of down there with Birmingham. Now that's all for the WSL. Obviously, we'll just touch on next week's fixtures. Obviously, saying that Aston Villa will want to improve on Saturday morning. They go to West Ham. So West Ham United will play Aston Villa there. Then on Saturday, that game is actually the West Ham Villa game is on Sky. On Sunday, then at 12:30, live on the BBC, Chelsea look to respond to that defeat as they welcome Everton to Kingsmeadow. So two sides that saw defeat this week because partially, or more than partially, because of their back three. Interesting to see how they both opt to set up in that game. Do they still go for a back three and who can bounce back and get the win? Everton people said, had a chance of beating City. That wasn't to be the case. If they really want to show that they're top 3 contenders, can they go to Kingsmeadow and get something? At 2:00 then, Birmingham will face Brighton at St Andrews, and that will be on the FA Player. And Reading face Arsenal, also on the FA Player. And Leicester City make their first home game of the season against Manchester United at the King Power Stadium. Like I said, we've got a preview show looking at that fixture tonight with myself, Matt, and Hannah from the Leicester City Supporters Club. And then finally, wrapping up that weekend of WSL action, live on Sky Sports again, 6:45, Manchester City played Tottenham Hotspur. So, Spurs will be looking to go for a second win, but City will be looking really to stick the boot in there and move on to 6 points. So that's all for WSL. Moving on now, we'll touch on the championship fixtures. All 6 fixtures happened this week. Obviously, last weekend, the Charlton against Lewis game was postponed, but no such postponements this week. All 6 fixtures going ahead. So, the first game from Saturday, Watford played their first home game at Vicarage Road. They welcomed Liverpool. A really difficult, actually, first couple of games for Watford. Had Durham away last weekend, and this weekend welcomed Liverpool. 2 of the favourites to go up. Liverpool started really well, and Missy Bo-Kearns scoring direct from a corner after 6 minutes probably isn't the start, that Watford would have wanted. But, they found themselves 1-0 down, and it was always going to be about how they responded to that. But Liverpool just kept their foot on the gas, and Liverpool played really well. And, we saw Rihanna Dean start this game, and she was pretty handsomely rewarded, actually, with 2 fantastic goals to take Liverpool 3-0 up before the break. But Watford, I think, they responded well. They had opportunities to get something. They created opportunities. They created chances, and they were able to score a couple. In the 79th minute, Melvold scored before Ward into stoppage time was able to get another goal back. But obviously, it wasn't enough as they fell to a 3-2 defeat. I was worried, I think, at the start of the season about Watford. I wasn't sure if they were really going to have enough to stay up. But I think they've kind of shown in the first couple of games, they could have nicked a point against Durham last week. They showed really good character and determination to sort of try and get themselves back into this game against Liverpool. It wasn't to be, but they were able to kind of go and get a couple of goals. And I think, when they get around to playing sides that are going to be down and around that bottom half, you imagine your Crystal Palaces, your Blackburns, potentially Lewis and Sunderland as well. I think, they could have enough about them to stay up. I still think that they'll be down and around the bottom. But they may have enough to stay up. Now, moving on to Sunday's fixtures, 5 fixtures on Sunday. Charlton Athletic beat Coventry United. And we said last week that when there's a goal inside the first minute or so, it really does completely destroy any game plan that you had. And that's what happened, I think, to Coventry here. Ella Rutherford was able to score early on. Corner wasn't quite cleared properly. It fell to Rutherford, who was able to kind of give Charlton the lead really early on. And obviously any plan then that the Coventry had was out of the window. Coventry were able to get themselves back in it just before half-time. Molly Green scoring directly from a corner, the second one of the weekend. But shortly afterwards, Charlton in the second half just kind of went, and Rachel Rowe added a second for them to take the lead before Heather Rutherford went and scored from about 25 yards out to make it 3-1. And Coventry didn't really seem to have a great deal of chances. We said last week that I think they struggled to connect their attack and defence, and it seems as though something similar has happened this week. There didn't really seem an awful lot created from them. Like I say, their one goal, their only goal so far this season came directly from Molly Green's corner, yet to score from open play. And I think maybe things there are going to take a little bit of time to click before the ball starts really rolling. But Charlton Athletic, in their first professional game at home, will be really, really pleased with the 3-1 win and deserved it. Deservedly so. They looked good for it, and it's about how they respond to that now. The next game, London City Lionesses beat Crystal Palace 2-1. There are now only two sides in this division who have a 100% record, and London City are one of them. Their 2-1 victory against Palace. They responded well. Waldy took the lead for Palace before London City were then able to respond after 11 minutes through a penalty. And then Jamie Lee Napier, just for half-time, was able to get her goal. She could have had the second one in the second half, but it was ruled out for offside. And Ag also had a fantastic opportunity where she could have scored as well. So, London City could have been sort of 3-4, maybe even 5-1 up. But, Palace dug in and they had a chance to steal a point as well. Late on, there was a really fantastic opportunity for Millie Farrow to score, but didn't quite take that chance. And so obviously they a great result last week, beating Bristol City, but weren't able to follow it up this week. And London City will be pleased that they were able to get the 3 points, especially with some potential title rivals dropping points with Coventry. And obviously they beat Liverpool last week. Sheffield United then, of course, caused Durham to drop points by beating them 3-1. All of Sheffield United's goals coming from set pieces, and Sheffield looking really dangerous from set pieces. We kind of saw it in this game, another goal direct from a corner, and Clark's free kick was just an absolute peach. It was a fantastic free kick, and just, if you've not seen the clip, honestly, go onto Twitter, go onto Sheffield United's Twitter, find that free kick. Genuinely a fantastic goal, and Sheffield looked good for their defeat. They kind of kept Durham quiet, and we said last week that I think Durham was strong, and I think they will continue to be strong this year. But for Sheffield United to really go and get that win, Natalie was there to see that, and obviously very pleased with what she saw. But yeah, I think Sheffield looked really strong and kept Durham quiet, which Durham won't be pleased to have lost ground to London City already. But all credit to Sheffield. They were fantastic, and they were a threat from set pieces consistently. And I think if any team can really turn set piece into a weapon, then they're bound to be a threat in this division. So Sheffield United will absolutely be hoping to continue to be a threat from set pieces moving forward. One of last week's, actually two of last week's shock results in Sunderland and Blackburn Rovers met at the Stadium of Light. So another men's ground there to join Vicarage Road in the Championship, where Sunderland ran out 2-0 winners over Blackburn Rovers. I think Blackburn started this game slowly. Inside 10 minutes, Heron had put Sunderland in the lead, and inside 20 minutes, Scar had doubled that lead. Blackburn just kind of started, didn't really start as quick as they would have hoped. Sunderland, said last week, looked like a really well-organised, solid defensive unit. And I think they looked the same again this week. I think they looked like they all knew what each other were doing, knew what they needed to do, knew where they needed to be, and did really well to get this win. Blackburn probably back down to earth with a bump here. They grew into the game, but weren't really able to drag themselves back into it. Had some chances, probably should have scored, and there's arguments to be made that they could have got a point, maybe deserved a point, but you need to score to get points in this game, and they just weren't really able to convert any of their sort of chances into absolute sort of clear-cut chances. And Sunderland defended well, and again, all power to them. They deserved their win. They looked strong, and them and London City are the only two sides in this division with 100% records. Obviously, Charlton on the side, having only played one. We'll see how they get on next week. And the final game was Bristol City against Lewes. Lewes took the lead in the first half, and I think they looked the better side. I think Bristol City started slow again. They started slow last week against Crystal Palace. But I think they started slow again this week, and that's something they're going to need to sort before they kind of move forward. If they're going to try and want to come back up towards the WSL, I don't think it's going to be enough for them this year. But we shall see. The second half, though, I think Bristol got back into the game. They did really well, and were able to sort of fight their way back into the game through Harrison scoring a genuinely fantastic goal that's worthy to get any team back into the game. Again, if you've not seen that one, go and check that out. And then Jamat was able to seal the goods with from the penalty spot to give Bristol City the win there. So that does it for the championship. So we just have the National League games to wrap up for you now. We'll start with the Northern First Division, the Division 1 North. We'll look at the results from there. Barnsley drew 1-1 with Bradford City. Chester the Street Town drew 2-2 with Stockport County. FC United beat Alnwick Town 6-2, including 5 goals from captain Kirsty Chambers. If you want to see some info on that, check out our Instagram page. Matt and Ben went down there and posted some match reactions on Instagram and Twitter. Newcastle United drew 1-1 with Chorley. And my game of the week was Leeds United against Liverpool Feds, which Leeds United won 1-0, which sees them go to the top of the table. Having played the game more, they are on 12. They have lost one game. Newcastle United are still yet to lose, are one of the only teams left with a unbeaten record. And if we now go and have a look at the Northern Premier Division, Brighouse Town beat Middlesbrough 4-1. Burnley, after a couple of disappointing weeks, beat Huddersfield Town 4-0. Hull City lost Hull City rather, beat Fylde by 3-0. Although I'm not 100% sure on that because that doesn't quite match up. Fylde won 3-0 rather. The website here is wrong against Hull City. Stoke City beat Loughborough Lightning 5-1. West Brom beat Sheffield FC 2-1. And in the top of the table clash, Wolves beat Nottingham Forest by 1-0. So Fylde and Wolves currently tied at the top of that division on 13 points. Looking forward to next weekend then. The interesting thing actually is the FA Cup starts again. The first qualifying round has been drawn for that, for kind of, your much lower down the pyramid teams will be joining in. Obviously, WSL teams won't join that until January. But an interesting one potentially there for the Salford City Lionesses against Curzon Ashton Ladies. That's a potential game that people could look out for. So my game of the week for next week's Women's National League is going to be FC United against Fylde on Sunday. Now, this is in the Women's National League Cup, and obviously Fylde flying high towards the top of the Northern Premier Division, and FC United responding well to losing a couple of games at the start of the season, kind of hoping to have really responded and will be looking to test themselves against much higher opposition. So that is all for this wrap up this week. Tune in again next week where we'll kind of go over the second week of the championship season, and tune in this evening where Matt and I will be previewing Manchester United's fixture against Leicester City at the King Power with Hannah from their supporters club. Have a good rest of your day, everybody, and I'll see you all next week.